So, why don't you tell me about your life, Martin?
I was born here in Eisleben in 1483. My father ran a copper mining business, but we were poor and life was hard for us. "This is no life for a son of mine," my father used to say to me. He wanted something better for me. As far as my success was concerned, the sky was the limit. He dreamt of me becoming a famous lawyer. He thought I could become rich and successful. "You've got it in you," he'd tell me. "You can escape this life of drudgery and become something, Martin." Well, maybe I could, I thought. And so, at the age of 18, I packed my bags for university in Erfurt. It would cost my father every last penny he had, but I was to become a lawyer. Or at least, that was the plan. Well, things were going well, and I'd been studying for 7 years now. My father was proud of me. He must have felt that his investment was paying off. But then something happened. A close friend of mine died suddenly. It was beyond grief. I'd never felt death so closely. And it got me thinking, what if I suddenly died? What if it were tonight? What would happen to me? Am I ready to meet God face to face? I just didn't know. And not long after this, something else happened, which I truly believed at the time was sent from God. I'd been to visit my parents, and I was on my way back to the university in Erfurt when I was caught in the most violent thunderstorm. Rain was coming down in sheets, forked lightning was cracking across the sky from edge to edge. And then suddenly an enormous bolt of lightning came down just inches from me, and I was thrown to the ground by the air pressure. I had narrowly escaped death, and I fell to my knees. "Help, St. Anna! I will become a monk!" I had an overwhelming sense that St. Anne really had heard my cry for help and saved me. I therefore determined to honor my vow and give the rest of my life to serving the Catholic Church as a monk. Well, of course, my father was furious. I was abandoning my law studies that he had spent his life savings on, but I felt I had a higher calling, and from that point on, I threw myself into a life of strict rules. I fasted, prayed to the saints, counted and confessed my sins daily, all in an effort to become holy and acceptable to God, just as I'd promised St. Anne that I would do. Before long, I was moving up the ranks. I became a fully fledged priest in 1507. I used to preach and teach others in the Catholic Church. Sad thing is, I must have looked great on the outside, but inside the truth was, I was feeling miles and miles away from God, as though he were angry with me. But no matter what I did or how hard I tried, I just couldn't get any closer to him. Well, how could a wretch like me ever become before such a holy God? And although I never admitted it openly, this question plagued me constantly. And then an opportunity came up for me in 1510 to travel to the Vatican in Rome, where the Pope lived. I thought maybe this is what I need: to visit the holy place, to be a pilgrim to all those holy sites, to see the holy relics. Surely I'd feel closer to God in Rome. But once again, all I found was a feeling of emptiness and disillusionment. Well, I thought the priests, bishops, cardinals there were going to be the very picture of holiness. But in actual fact, I found they were teaching lies and living in debauchery. You've heard of the Scala Sancta, haven't you? The holy steps that Jesus climbed in Jerusalem when he went to meet Pilate. Well, you can visit these in Rome, and I did. Well, I didn't just visit them. I climbed them slowly, kissing each step as I went in the hope that it would make me feel closer to God. But the higher and higher I climbed, the further and further away from God I felt. It had been a huge anticlimax, and I left Rome feeling angry, disappointed. When I got back to Wittenberg, I carried on teaching as I had been before. I still hadn't found the answer that I'd been looking for, but I just didn't have any alternative. I assumed that if ever I were to find peace with God, I just needed to try a bit harder, do more, become better. So I carried on my studies, and in 1512 I became a fully qualified doctor of theology. It's so ironic now I think back. You know the word theology means, don't you? It means the study of God. Imagine that. I was supposed to know all about God. I had a certificate to prove it, but as I was soon to find out, I didn't know him at all. And one day, as I sat in my study reading through the book of Romans, and there was one line that just jumped off the page. I mean, I must have read the same words countless times before. But this time, it was different. Before reading the Bible, it always felt like reading a textbook to me. But now it was as if the words were alive. I'll never forget the words of that verse. For in the gospel, the righteousness of God is revealed. A righteousness that is by faith from first to last. Just as it is written, the righteous will live by faith. Do you see what it's saying? In the gospel, the righteousness of God is revealed. Righteousness, or being good enough for God, is not something that can be earned. It's something that is revealed. It's something that comes from God. It says that in order to be in a relationship with God, to be good enough to come before him, to have peace with God, we must live by faith. Not by a set of strict rules or moral codes like I've been doing, but right here on the pages of God's Word, I was reading that peace with God can only come through what God has already done for us, and not what we can do for him. It suddenly all fell into place. When Jesus died on the cross, he did everything that was necessary for me to come into relationship with God. He paid for my sins and gave me his righteousness. Well, at last, the God who had seemed 1,000 miles away was now closer than I could have imagined. I was free from my fruitless striving to become good enough for him. And through what Jesus had done, I could be made righteous enough not merely to come into God's presence, but to be in the most wonderful relationship with him. That is truly the greatest joy man can ever know, to know and be known by his Creator.